Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in coast to coast across Canada and the United States today. My name is Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And if you're new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, you're joining us on a very special day because today we are continuing our epic National Wildlife Week series in conjunction with the amazing folks at the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We have talked about bats. We've talked about pollinators. Just like an hour ago, we talked with David Seaburn about turtles. Tomorrow we wrap up with grassland birds. It's going to be very bittersweet tomorrow when we all wrap up on my birthday. It's going to be very fun. But today we're going to wrap up our daily program series with the amazing Rhyl Frith. She's going to talk to us today about whales, their conservation, what we're doing to protect them, some of the threats they face, and more. For any of our students live on YouTube, watching 10 years down the road on our YouTube channel, if you ever have a chance to see a whale in person, it's one of the most profound and amazing experiences you can have on planet Earth. Whales are bigger than dinosaurs. They're the biggest animals to ever exist on our planet. We are doing such great work to conserve them coast to coast across not just Canada, but around the world. So I'm really excited you're joining today to learn a little more. Now, as usual, I've gotten a little ahead of myself because I'm just too excited. I want to note we are going to have a little Kahoot today. So if you want to join in with a few question quiz between our talk and Q&A, this will be our game pen. We'd love to have you take part, just an extra way to keep it interactive. Now, I will note too, at the end, there's going to be so much more to keep learning going. 45 minutes is not enough to learn everything about whales and what you can do to protect them. So we are going to be sending you links to the series, to the Wildlife Week page, to the education page for Canadian Wildlife Federation, and Hinterland Who's Who, where you can explore more of Canada's amazing wildlife. So with all that said, I'm going to stop talking in a second, turn you over to Rhyl to blow your minds about her amazing work on whales. Thank you so much for joining today, Rhyl. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you to you and the team at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm going to share with you all about North Atlantic right whale conservation efforts. So I'm going to be focusing my talk on whales just on one species, the North Atlantic right whale. I'm calling from my office at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, where I'm doing my master's degree in right whale feeding ecology. But before I started my master's, I spent 4 years with the Canadian Wildlife Federation working on the marine conservation program. And in that role, I mainly focused on the interactions with right whales and the fishing industry. And today I'm going to share a little bit about the work that I did while in that position. So the conservation of marine wildlife is something that I'm most passionate about, and I hope to continue to pursue throughout my career as a marine biologist. The word conservation is a term that some of you might not be familiar with. And what conservation means is to make sure that wild animals, wild plants, and their habitats are not harmed by human activities. The first time I remember hearing about the concept of conservation was while I was walking along the beach as a child picking up shells in the summertime. And every shell I saw that I liked, I picked up and I put it in my pocket. And pretty soon my pockets were full. And I remember my mom telling me that the shells are part of what makes the beach beautiful. And if I took them all, the person who came along next wouldn't get to experience the beach in all of its beauty like I did. And I carried that lesson through life. Now I work to make sure that the next generation after me can see the world with as much of its natural spaces and natural wildlife preserved as possible. So today I'm going to share with you all about the conservation of North Atlantic right whales, which are one of my favorite whale species. Now first, let's take a look at where right whales live. So right whales live somewhere between Florida in the United States of America, which is down at the bottom of the screen, and Newfoundland, which is in Canada, all the way up at the top of the screen. Most of the population spend their winters in the warm, sunny waters down around Florida, and then they travel all the way north up into Canadian waters to eat during the summertime. Now, right whales have unique characteristics that can help us identify them when we see them out on the water. First of all, if you look on their back, they don't have a dorsal fin. Most whales have a dorsal fin, but right whales don't. And right whales also have white markings on the top of their nose and along their chin, and those are called callosities. Callosities are basically thickened tissue that lives on the top of their head and around the chin and around the eye. And little organisms called cyamids live amongst that thickened tissue. And those cyamids are what gives it the whitish color. There's a close-up on the left of those cyamids living in the thickened skin of the callosity of the right whale. Now, callosities are very useful because they are unique. Every whale has their own patterns of callosities. And oftentimes we name right whales after the shapes of their callosities. And then that allows researchers to keep track of things like where the whales are and whether they've given birth recently, using their unique identifications. So this whale is named snow cone after the callosity markings in the shape of a snow cone on the top of her head. The reason I'm focusing my talk today on North Atlantic right whales is because their population is declining. Right whales are critically endangered, and what this means is they face an extremely high risk of extinction in their natural habitat. There are an estimated 356 individual right whales left in the entire population. Take a close look at this graph. The year goes from 1990 to 2022 along the bottom, and the number of whales along the vertical axis goes from 200 to 500. And you can see that around 2010, the blue line starts to go down. And that indicates that the number of whales starts to drop from 2010 to the present day. So that decline starting in 2010 corresponds to a change in habitat for where right whales eat during the summer. Before 2010, they used to spend their summers eating in an area called the Bay of Fundy, which is where all the white-colored animals are in the picture on the left. And then in 2010, the water in this region warmed up too much and their food stopped growing there. So right whales headed further north to an area called the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is where the green whales are in the photo on the right. But in this new habitat, right whales encounter a lot of problems that are causing their numbers to decline. Part of the problem they're facing is they're getting tangled up in fishing gear. The issue is not really the traps on the bottom that are catching things like lobster and crab. The issue is with the rope that connects the traps to the buoys at the surface. Right whales feed by swimming along in the water with their mouths open, and they're often down near the bottom where there's no light, it's dark, and they can't see the rope. And when they do this in areas where there's a lot of fishing gear, like where they're now spending their summers feeding up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, they're at a high risk of getting tangled up in rope. Now, getting caught up in rope can cause a lot of problems for the whales. It can make it hard for them to swim. And if the rope gets stuck in their mouth, it can make it hard for them to eat. And these challenges lead to whales having less energy for other important factors, like having calves and traveling all the way down south to Florida for the winter and back up to Canada in the summer. So I'm going to share with you a video that I took last summer when I was on a research vessel studying right whales up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Our research crew came across this 14-year-old male that was recently entangled. We noticed it first because it was swimming really fast and breathing really hard and thrashing its tail around. And when we put the drone up to film it, we could see that there was a very long length of rope, several times longer than the length of the whale's body behind it. We followed it until dark, and we reported its position and the direction that it was heading to the emergency rescue team so they could try to find it the next day. But unfortunately, the whale was too far offshore and the weather was too rough for the rescue team to find it the next day. Luckily, a plane flew by a few weeks later and they spotted him and took photos of him with no rope. So that means that the gear must have come off on its own, which does happen sometimes, but it certainly doesn't happen all the time. So I mentioned that there's such thing as a whale rescue team that tries to free the whales when they're found with rope on them. This is a really dangerous job, and it's not always successful. Highly trained professionals use a small boat to get up really close to the whales, and they use a knife to cut the line in strategic places. Sometimes they're able to help, but other times the whale is too far gone, or the gear can't be safely removed, or the whale escapes before they can get close enough to help. So while this is really important work, preventing the whales from getting tangled in fishing rope in the first place would be a much better solution. So what does this mean? Should we just stop fishing? Well, no, we can't really do that, because fishing is a major industry that provides many people with jobs, and it brings a lot of money into our country. So can we just fish at a different time of year then, when the whales aren't there? Well, no, we can't really do that either, because species are fished at a certain time of year for a reason. They have to be caught when they're at the right stage of their life cycle to be harvested. So what's the solution then? Well, this is what the Canadian government has decided to do. They've decided to close fishing areas to traditional fishing where right whales are spotted. So this map shows you the area in the Gulf of St. Lawrence where the right whales are spending their summers up in Canada. And this map shows you the area where fishing was closed in 2023. All the gray squares are permanently closed for the season because right whales were spotted multiple times in those areas. And then the red squares were closed for just 2-week periods because the right whales were spotted once in those areas. What this means for the fishermen is that they can't set their traps in these areas. And if their traps are already in those areas when they're closed, they have to go in and remove their gear. And you can see that there's not a lot of space left over once all these grids shut down. So imagine having fished in the same area for years, and maybe your parents fished there and their parents did too, and all of a sudden you're being told you can't fish there anymore, and you can't make any money to support your family. That's really hard. So there has to be a solution that can allow fishing to occur even when whales are present in the area. And that's what I've been working on with the Canadian Wildlife Federation for 4 years. So taking a step back before I introduce the solution to fishing in a closed area, I want to explain how traditional fishing works. So each trap on the seafloor at the bottom of this image has a rope attached to it that goes all the way to the buoy at the surface of the ocean. Now, when a fisherman comes along to haul their traps to see what's in there, what they caught, they look for the buoys at the surface, and then they haul all the rope up into their boat until the trap comes up with it. And that's the way that fishing has been done for years and years. And the problem with that way of fishing is that whales can get caught in that rope between the trap and the buoy at the surface. And that's why the government has been closing down fishing areas to any kind of fishing that involves setting a trap with a vertical rope up to the surface. So there has to be a way to fish without those ropes so that these fisheries can continue without posing any risk to the whales. That's where something called on-demand fishing comes into play. So on-demand fishing technology uses advanced underwater technology to keep all the rope contained next to the traps on the seafloor until the fishermen come along when they're ready to haul their gear. This yellow cage in the image is one example of an on-demand fishing system. You can see that all the rope that would normally go from the trap to the surface of the ocean is inside the yellow cage, and the buoys are on the lid of that cage. The way that on-demand fishing works is kind of like how radio walkie-talkies work. When a fish harvester is ready to haul their traps, they press a button on a signaling device, and that makes a noise underwater. And that noise reaches the yellow cage. So the yellow cage hears that signal. The lid releases, allowing the buoys to bring the rope back up to the surface so that the fish harvester can grab the buoys and bring the rope and their traps back onto the boat. And in the meantime, whales can swim safely above the traps without any risk of getting entangled. So I'm going to show you a video. What you're seeing is a boat in Nova Scotia that's fishing with on-demand gear. So here they are getting their traps ready on the deck of the boat. Now you can see that the traps are being set one by one. And the rope that you see in this video is the rope that's between the traps that stays close to the seafloor, not the vertical rope that goes to the surface that's dangerous for the whales. That's all inside the yellow cage. So when the fisherman's ready to haul their gear, they push the button, make the noise, and that yellow lid pops back up at the surface. And it brings with it the rope that was inside that cage that they can then use to haul their gear back. So that's what you're seeing now. So you're seeing the yellow lid with the rope that was inside the cage, and they're going to use that rope to bring their traps back. It's not always this nice outside when fishing happens. This was a pretty nice day. So to summarize, the best way to prevent right whales from getting entangled is to not allow fishing with vertical rope anywhere near where they're detected. And that's why we close down those areas. But the solution to keep fisheries in business by allowing them to fish in those zones is to use on-demand fishing technology so they can fish without vertical rope. It might sound like we found the solution and the problem is over, it's solved, but it's not quite that simple. So since 2019, the Canadian Wildlife Federation have been testing these on-demand systems in real fishing areas with real fishermen to see which systems work best and in what conditions. So some systems have longer battery lives than others, some are faster to come to the surface than others, some work better in deeper water with more current. And it's very important that the systems that fish harvesters use are safe and are reliable so they don't lose their traps if the gear doesn't come back to the surface when they call for it. So these are all things that are important to identify before just putting gear in the hands of fishermen and telling them to go fish with it. First, we need to know how it works, and then we need to improve how it works by providing feedback to the gear developers to make sure that this equipment is safe and reliable. And we've made a lot of progress since we first started this gear testing program to where we are today with it. So right now, the Canadian Wildlife Federation has an on-demand gear lending program that works kind of like a library. So fishermen can freely borrow gear to use during a closure and then return it afterwards. So what this means is if a right whale is spotted in Canadian waters and the government closes the area to fishing, a fisherman can call us and request to borrow on-demand gear. Our team then takes down their information and sets up a time to deliver the gear and train them how to use it. So we drive up to their boat, we go out to sea with them, we teach them how to fish with the on-demand gear, and we leave them with the units for the rest of the season. And we do this for free, so there's no cost to the fishermen to get to experiment with this new technology. This helps the fishermen get used to the idea of fishing differently from how they fish their whole lives without them having to spend thousands of dollars on such new technology that they aren't sure is going to work. So we've made a lot of progress with a huge amount of effort over the past few years to help prevent whales from getting entangled in fishing gear. But that's not the only issue that right whales are facing. Another major issue is vessel traffic. So right whales don't understand that ships are dangerous and that they should move out of the way. So they're very vulnerable to getting hit. And the government is working on regulating ship speeds to slow the boats down so that they can avoid the whales if they see one. And another threat that right whales are facing is that their food distribution is changing. So this picture on the right shows you that right whales' favorite food, and that's Calanus finmarchicus. That's what it's called. It's a tiny little creature that lives in the ocean, and it looks really big in this photo, but it's only about half the size of a grain of rice, so really small. But right whales find patches in the ocean where there are a lot of Calanus aggregated into a really thick kind of soup. And if you think back to the presentation at the beginning, I told you that right whales left their normal feeding areas in 2010 because the water was warming up too much and they had to move further north to find it. And as ocean conditions continue to warm up with the way the climate is changing, we don't know whether right whales will have enough to eat in the years to come. And that's something that I hope to answer with my master's research, which I don't have time to get into today, but I'd be happy to answer questions, or I'll provide my email afterward if anything comes up afterwards. I'm almost done. I just want to leave with a message of hope. There are so many people studying right whales and trying to help their population recover. There are even more scientists working on right whales than there are right whales left. So many people care. The government has made the right decision to put in strict regulations for the shipping and fishing industry, even if it's making it harder for people to work in those jobs. But because of all this, the right whale population decline is starting to slow down, which is great news. And it's the first step in giving their population the ability to recover. So if we leave them alone, they'll start reproducing more and they can get their numbers back up. And if you're wondering what you yourself can do to help, a great place to start is learning all there is to know about right whales and sharing what you learn with your friends. The more people that are aware of and care about this situation, the better chance we have of making a difference. So pay attention to the organizations that are helping out, like the Canadian Wildlife Federation, the Canadian Whale Institute, and the Marine Animal Response Society, and look for ways that you can support those organizations.
Fantastic. Well, this was so much fun. Oh, sorry, you got more. I'll stop talking.
Nope, that's it. Okay. I was going to put a quick plug in. I'm not going to show it because there's no time, but there's a documentary called The Last of the Right Whales, which just showcases the beauty of these animals and some of the threats they're facing in more detail than I covered today and what's being done to help them. So again, that's called The Last of the Right Whales. And if you enjoyed the topic of this presentation, check that movie out and you'll learn lots more. So thank you very much.
I'll make sure all our classes have a link to that or whatever they can get online to make sure you have that. So stay tuned for the end of the broadcast. I promise we'll have lots to keep the learning going. But yeah, what we're going to do now is dive in with our Kahoot together. There's already a bunch of you in on this. So we've got some general whale questions. Some relate to our main thing of the day. Some are a little bit different. We're going to test your understanding, have a little bit of fun. For those who are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is, as anyone who's been with me over the last 3 days will know, our everlasting respect. It's pretty cool. So please feel free to join in. We're going to do those 4 questions momentarily. And then we're going to take questions. We've got so many groups on YouTube. Welcome back to some of our familiar faces that have been joining us for this whole epic series. And Mr. Martell's class, excited to come to you. Nicole, you guys are all queued up to go. But let's get underway, Rhyl. I can't wait. Here we go. Starting. I hope a whale name wins this one. We haven't had a name of a person win that relates to the animal in a while, and it's always very satisfying when that happens. All right. True or false? The biggest animal in the history of the world is a dinosaur. I found a great dinosaur picture for this. I think it's very silly. We've got this like toy dinosaur on a plane. It's kind of fun. I'll give you one big hint. This program is not celebrating dinosaurs, so perhaps it's more related to what we're talking about. 46 of you in. Geez, these kids are doing really well lately. Thank you guys for being so on the ball. It is false. Yes, it's a whale. It's a blue whale. It's the biggest thing ever to exist ever. In fact, quite a few of the big whales are bigger than any dinosaur that ever existed, which is insane that we live at a time where you can just go on a boat and go see some of the biggest creatures ever to be on planet Earth. Very cool. Most of you got this right. Friendly Yak takes our lead. Okay, let's go to question 2. All right, this is a multi-select, so it's going to be more than one correct answer. What are some threats that whales face in Canada? And frankly, these are true everywhere. So ship strikes, entanglement in fishing gear, noise pollution, climate change. It's more than one. Might be all of them. Maybe if you've joined for our other Kahoots before, you might know the sort of thing that I tend to do with these things. I'm not very creative. It's the same idea all the time. Yes, it is all of them. It is all 4. Noise pollution is a big one. Ship strikes, these are quite related. Entanglement in fishing gear, of course, we talked about today. Climate change is pretty much affecting every species on this planet. So you guys did a really good job with this. Let's see. Throws our leaderboard in disarray. Funny Rooster takes the lead. Rhyl, if you want to give us hints with seconds to spare any of these, you're welcome to chime in. Fishing gear that gets lost and remains a threat to wildlife is called a fish trapper, a ghost net. This never actually happens. We never lose fishing nets. We're perfect at keeping them on the ship. Or a flotsam net. Flotsam is a word that just needs to be said more, I think, in everyday society because it's really fun. We've talked about this in quite a few of our broadcasts, actually. I don't know if the term, let's see. What do we think? GhostNet is our correct answer. September is classically our month with a lot of marine plastics programs. If you want to learn more about ghost fishing and ghost nets, some of the work being done to stop that, in addition to today, you should absolutely go to our YouTube channel and check that out. That keeps our leaderboard set with like the barest of leads of first over second. True or false, whale populations can recover if given room to thrive. I want everyone to get this right. This is the essence of our whole series talking about conservation programs. Can things get better if we help them? That's the essence of the question. I hope you're all on board with this. I know it can be a stressful field, conservation. It can seem very doom and gloom at times, but resounding yes. And 53 of you got this right out of the 56. Yes, the 3 of you that are pessimists, we can absolutely make a difference. We stopped whaling commercially in 1986, and a lot of whales have done a big recovery since then because we gave them room to not have to be worrying about some of our threats. There are always going to be challenges for wildlife. If we give wildlife space, if we help protect it, we can make a really positive difference. Funny Rooster second, which means I think that our friend who almost went wire to wire has won. Friendly Yak, way to go. If you are any of these people, let us know who you are in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. Our Martell class, I'm going to come to you guys in just a second, so you can take a second to put your thinking caps on. We're going to take some from our YouTubers to begin. Miss Cork wants to know, does the signal sound from the new traps interfere with whale communication? So does this good thing that we're doing cause some of the issues that some of the bad things that we're worried about have for whales? Do we know? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is no. It's not a long enough or a loud enough or a high pitch enough noise to bother any of the whales. So it's just a quick kind of 2-second signal, and it's outside of the hearing range of a lot of marine mammals, and the trap will hear it. But there's lots of noise in the water. There's the sounder from boats, and there's ships going by, and this is really quite small in comparison.
That's a great answer. It's really important when we do things to save creatures that we don't inadvertently cause any problems for them. So that is a fantastic query to kick us off. And again, you can sort of think of it as the difference between hearing someone talk across a room versus someone yelling at you at full volume right beside your face. That's no fun. No one wants that. Great job, guys. We're going to take one more from YouTube really quick. And Martell, we're coming to you. Do all whales have bad eyesight is one of our questions. Or do whales have bad eyesight at all? Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, whale eyes are fascinating, and they're certainly very important. A lot of whales rely mostly on hearing for kind of interacting with each other and finding prey for some of the odontocete whales with toothed whales. But yeah, it's actually, I think their eyes are better than we might think, and it varies from species to species, but there's a lot of research being done on right whale eyes currently, which is fascinating, that suggests they might actually be able to see patches of prey in the water, even at depths with low light levels. So yeah, great question.
You would know this better than I would. I think a blue whale eye is like this big, right? It's one of the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. So they're monstrous eyes.
Massive.
Very cool. Mr. Martell, High Point Elementary, come on in. And Rhyl, sorry, if you want to exit screen share so you can see me again. Yeah, come on in. I apologize for not mentioning that. High Point. Hi, guys.
What is that?
Okay, what are you asking for?
How big can whale get?
The right whale.
Our right whales get.
Yeah, they can be at least 10 meters long. So they can be super long.
So over 30 feet for our American friends and about the size of a school bus or larger. Like, these are monstrous animals. They're very, very cool. Great question, guys. All right, Nicole wanted to know, are whales omnivores? Are they eating animals only, plants, bit of both? What's the deal?
Mm-hmm. They eat little tiny, it depends on what kind of whale. So baleen whales, like the right whale, they have these kind of like comb-like structures instead of teeth. And what that does is allows something called plankton to filter in. So planktons are kind of little, you can think of them as little shrimp or things like tiny little bugs. So those are live organisms that the whales are feeding on. And then the toothed whales will eat things like squid and fish. And so there's differences in foraging in what different kinds of whales are eating. But
On the note of sort of linking together our last two questions, we talked about this in a broadcast the other day, and I just have to mention it for our audience's sake. The largest eye in the animal kingdom is not a whale, it's the giant squid, which is the main prey of sperm whales, which is the greatest battle in the history of nature. We've got this like 50, 60-foot monster whale that's hunting this 40, 50-foot, toothy, beaked, claw, tentacled cephalopod, like thousands of feet down. It's super, super cool. I don't know if there's ever been a sort of predator prey between two such large creatures ever in history. So very neat. And that I'm glad we got that question. So thank you for that, Nicole. All right, a couple more from YouTube, and then we're going to head back to our Martel crew. Let's see. How much do the high-tech on-demand systems cost for Miss Mulligan's crew?
Yeah. So right now they're quite expensive. They're a few $1,000s for each system. But that's because the units are not made. They're not mass produced right now. They're kind of made at a very small scale at a local manufacturing facility. So once these products are sort of on the market and harvesters are able to buy them, then the cost will go down as the demand increases. So they're still sort of in that trial phase that are made to order. And that's why we have a lending program at the Canadian Wildlife Federation to allow harvesters to try this gear without having to put any money out of their pockets.
This leads so nicely into our next question, which is how many fishing boats asked to loan the new traps? Like, are people beating down your door or what?
Yeah, so it really depends on how many closures there are and how much of the fishing is done before the closures come in. So 2 years ago, we had a fairly busy year where we had 10 to 15 harvesters using the gear. And then last year, there weren't as many closures affecting some of the larger fisheries. So we had a few less harvesters, but we're expecting this year to be a little busier. So
fingers crossed. The more the merrier. High Point, we're going to head back to you guys. Come on in if you've got a second question for us. Hey.
How old can right whales get?
Ooh, that's a good question. They can live at least as long as humans, but I don't think we really know how long the oldest right whale could possibly be. A similar species to right whale, the bowhead whale that lives up in the Arctic, are some of the oldest animals on the planet. They can live for a couple hundred years at least. So these whales are big and they live a long time and they're fascinating.
We've been talking about longevity of animals a few times over the course of this broadcast series. Bats are unusually long-lived for something so small. Generally speaking, the bigger you get, the longer you live. So whales, we would expect to live quite long lives, but yes, consistently 40, 60, 80, 211 I know has been recorded for a bowhead whale. The only thing I can think of that's a big animal with sort of a skeleton of some sort that's longer than that is like a Greenland shark, which can be like 400 plus years, which is insane. But I love the question. Thanks, guys. Nicole wants to know, how big are baby right whales? When they're born, how big are they?
That's a good question. I think they're maybe about a third of the size of an adult right whale. So maybe about maybe your average height of a human, 5 or 6 feet or so. But that's a good question.
I want to harp on this for a second because I always like to put it in the human context. It sounds like a huge baby, but not only is it a huge baby, proportionally, it's a huge baby. Imagine if we had babies that were 1/3 our size. If you had like a 40-pound baby, it'd be terrifying. No one wants to think about that. So whales are a little bit bigger than most. I think, if I'm not mistaken, like a baby blue whale is about the size of an elephant, which is ridiculous that something can be that big coming out. Look up kiwi, the birds, not the fruit. If you want the scariest egg laying in all of nature, it will terrify you to see an x-ray of a kiwi. Let's see, YouTubers, feel free to chime in. GJ McGillivray, I'd love to hear from you guys out in Cordis. There's so many of you here today. Martel, I'm going to head back to you guys live. Nicole, in just a second. Rhyl, we've got a question about how many other people or groups are doing this sort of conservation around the world. So you're a master's student, you've had the chance to work with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. Do you get the chance to work collaboratively with other whale scientists from elsewhere? What's the deal?
Yeah, both in the US and in Canada. And a good place where all these groups come together is the North Atlantic Right Whale Consortium that happens annually. And they have a website that explains all the different topics that are discussed every year, and that's groups from mainly the US and Canada, like the New England Aquarium and the Canadian Whale Institute and the Marine Animal Response Society and the Clearwater Aquarium, and all of these organizations, scientists, researchers, NGOs, all come together to see what's been going on in the research community every year. What do we need to be doing differently? What are we doing well? And those meetings are really helpful for furthering right whale research.
So one of my favorite things about science in general is that if you get to be a scientist, you get to work with the coolest people all around the world doing some amazing things, like going out on some of these awesome boats to help save whales. Honestly, when I was a little kid, it was just the most magical thing to me that these were actual jobs that you could be paid to do. And so it's been really lucky to have the chance to chat with so many amazing scientists like Rhyl over the course of this CWF series. So thank you for that answer, a little bit more of the nitty gritty of what science is like. Our Martell crew, I'm going to head to you guys. We might take one more question after that, but time flies and you're having fun. So we are nearing the end of the broadcast. I'll make sure you guys have all the resources to keep the learning going. Come on in at High Point. Hey.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question for our class. We learned biodiversity in grade 6. How do right whales affect biodiversity, either negatively or positively, based on their numbers?
Amazing.
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that came to my mind is a big role that whales play in the ecosystem is actually their part of their digestion process. So right whales, they feed oftentimes deep in the water, and then they come to the surface and they poop at the surface, and that releases a lot of nutrients into the surface waters that creates opportunities for phytoplankton, little plants in the water to grow, and then those plants feed larger organisms like that are zooplankton and fish. And so the role of right whales in biodiversity is massive, and whales in general, they are so important for the ecosystem to recycle nutrients, to allow other species to use those nutrients to grow, and it cycles back into the food chain. So every species on Earth and in the ocean is the same. They're all sort of interconnected, and the loss of one will affect the loss of another. And it's really important to conserve every species so that we can maintain those loops and those cycles.
We've talked about that in every one of our broadcasts. It's usually me to highlight that, but thank you for doing so and for the poo story. So my wife and I were just watching Planet Earth 3 the other day. It's my early birthday present. It's like the greatest nature documentary series ever. And they literally featured Canada's humpbacks and the impact of their poo in helping the entire ecosystem, which sounds crazy, especially if you're new to the idea as a concept, but it's really, really important for oceans. It can help bring back fish. It can help bring back plankton. It can help bring back more whales. It's a really, really important thing. So I'm so glad we got that question. Thanks, guys. All right, Rhyl, we're going to take one more question, sort of a joint one from our two folks on YouTube. How many types of whales are there, and what is the rarest whale? No pressure.
Let's see. In Canada, there might be, you're putting me on the spot here.
I know. This is the point. This is the fun. It's Stump the
There are over 20.
Yes.
I can't give you an exact number. And the rarest whale, they're finding all these new subspecies of whales very often. But one story comes to mind. I was doing research on Sable Island a few years ago studying birds, and I saw a Sowerby's beaked whale washed up. Ooh. And I'd never heard of that before. And it lives kind of like in the gully system of off the continental shelf of Nova Scotia. And it's a very rare whale. I don't think it's the rarest, but the rarest that I've seen for sure.
I'm so glad you mentioned beaked whales, because they're so freaky. No one ever sees them. We actually did a program with Dr. Carrie Smith a few months back on beaked whales. That's her area of study. They're so neat. They don't have a beak like a bird, but they've got a very distinct face, and you almost never see them. I think I've seen like one bit of footage of a beaked whale ever. Like, we know they're out there. Sometimes they wash up on beaches, but they're remarkable creatures. And because we don't see them, we're pretty sure that they're quite rare, but we really don't know. It's amazing that some of the biggest animals on Earth, we still don't have a full understanding of where they breed, where they live, where they migrate. So I'm so glad you took it there, Rhyl. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to highlight again, if you want to check out more about Canada's incredible wildlife, Hinterland Who's Who, the education page of the Canadian Wildlife Federation, their amazing National Wildlife Week page, and of course, the wrap-up of our broadcast tomorrow with Grassland Birds and John Wilhurst. You can check all that out below and get this one, share with your friends and family on our YouTube channel. Before we wrap up and bring in our classes to say thank you and farewell, is there any last message you want to leave us on about our right whales, Rhyl?
Well, like I said at the end of my presentation, if we are able to keep these whales from getting entangled in fishing gear and from getting hit by boats, and we just allow their population to recover naturally, they are more than able to. And we can start to see those trends starting to happen where their population declines are leveling off. And we really, now is not the time to stop that conservation work. It's the time to keep going and see it through to the end. So yeah, thanks for paying attention.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Your passion, your enthusiasm, wishing you the best with the degree, and can't wait to have you on anytime you'd like to talk more about whales and more. I'm going to bring in our live class and say thank you and farewell. So High Point, if you want to join me in saying goodbye, YouTubers, you can scream out and yell as well. But have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now, guys. Thank you so much.